Hey guys, I'm coming to you from Pisa in Italy, and I'll be here for a couple of days. I'm just on my way to Genova, which is my birthplace, and also I'll be spending Christmas there with my grandfather. I decided that it would be great to kind of spend Christmas, the two of us. He would have been alone otherwise, and I would have felt lonely among people who I would have spent Christmas with, so it just makes sense. We're going to have a nice time together. We're going to bond. We're going to have a good time. I'm not a big fan of Christmas. Anyways, but while I'm in Pisa, I took the flight from Dublin to Pisa, and despite the weather, I was walking around the city for a good bit. Despite the weather and the floods, I obviously went to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which was majestic, and I also went to this really fascinating exhibition on futurism, which I'm a big fan of that art movement. I love it, and so it was great. And I might make a video about futurism if I'm in the right frame of mind. We'll see. But yesterday, so this video is not about that. This video is about something that I've been thinking about quite a bit over the past while, and I have been talking about it to the people who I met in wherever I went, and it was inspired by an article that I read last night while I was drinking a Campari Spritz in the bar of the hotel. Campari needs to sponsor me, by the way. I'd be a great sponsor for them. And by the way, speaking of futurism, Campari, you can't be more futuristic than that as far as alcoholic beverages is concerned. So anyways, I didn't have a book with me or anything. I just had my phone, and I took it out, and I had a look at the news that Google filtered for me, and most of them weren't interesting at all. Google never really gets it right. Google doesn't know me. I Google too many diverse things for it to know me. Anyways, one of them really caught my eye, and it had something to do with this thing that I've been thinking about, and that is quite simply, far too many artists keep making art long after the point in which it looks like they have nothing else to say. Basically, they just keep making art even though their works don't really say anything interesting, or maybe it's because they become unable for one reason or another to be able to communicate interesting things to their works of art. And there are obvious examples and exceptions. I can think of Kubrick or Pasolini or Picasso, but the list of artists who kept making great works of art, kept making works of art that really said something until the very end of their careers or till the very end of their lives, is quite short when we think about it. And the list of artists who understood when it was time to stop making art before they died, well, that's even shorter still. So there are obvious exceptions. I'm looking down at the notes because actually I was scribbling while I was writing, while I was drinking yesterday. It really was quite an inspiring sort of, it inspired me, this article that I've been talking about. The obvious exceptions are those whose lives are cut short. So people like Amy Winehouse, James Dean, Jean Vigo, they died way before their time. And, you know, I always suspect that part of the reason why we love them and celebrate them is because we suspect that they would have kept making great works of art and they still had so much more to say before they actually died, you know, prematurely. We don't really know that they would have kept making art, or they kept making good art. It's possible that they might not have, but we don't know. And because their work was so phenomenal before they actually died, we celebrate them also for the talent that was never expressed. And we suspect that they could have bloomed into something greater than they actually were. So that could be why we tend to celebrate them more than those who are alive. And that's kind of a curse for an artist, to be celebrated more in death than in life. Usually that is the case. Let's not kid ourselves. So by the same degree, what I also suspect is that those who live kind of fail to replicate the success of their younger selves. Another exception, though, is those who hit their peaks late in life, and there are countless examples of artists who hit their peaks past their youthful prime, let's say. People like Toni Morrison, people like Morgan Freeman, you know, or people like I don't know, Ang Lee. Anyways, they're artists who, didn't really make it until quite late in life. And so they're kind of an exception to that rule. Buena Vista Social Club, that's another one that I was thinking about. The musicians of Buena Vista Social Club, the Cuban musicians, they never were discovered until way late in life. They were, old men when they were discovered. So interesting to think that. So what is the article that kind of made me think of that? Well, Martin Scorsese said that The Irishman is the last movie he will ever make, or could be the last movie that he will ever make. And Martin Scorsese is quite possibly my favorite living director. I struggle to kind of think of anybody I like more than him. I think his prolific filmography is among the most flawless of any director, of any living director at least. I mean, he's the man who directed such films as, I don't know, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, The Silence, I love The Silence too, Mean Streets. And so they're all great films. I mean, I can't really think of any bad ones. Maybe there are bad ones. I mean, no filmography is completely flawless, especially one that has lasted such a long period of time. But anyways, The Irishman, I watched that recently and I thought it was a phenomenal film. And by the way, I heard a lot of people complain about its 3 hours and a half length. That may seem long, but the people who are complaining about that are the people who binge watch on series like Game of Thrones. And when you put the hours together of those episodes, especially those who watch it in one sitting, you can't really complain that a Martin Scorsese film is 3.5 hours long, especially when it's coming out mainly on a VOD platform where you can just pause it and get back to it, whenever you want to. I mean, I watched it in one sitting. I thought it was phenomenal. I loved the entire thing. So The Irishman to me is an amazing film. It's subdued, it's reflective, and if it was to be the final film of Martin Scorsese, it would be perfect because within it we find themes that he has dealt with throughout his entire life, from masculinity to violence to faith to power, aging. It's great. It's fantastic, and because of its pace, which is it's far slower than Goodfellas, for example, it's reflective, and it is the movie that you would picture Martin Scorsese making towards the end of his life, and perhaps even ending his fantastic filmography on this film. It's an epic, and it's a fantastic film to end it on. So given the fact that I'm such a fan, I ought to be heartbroken if he actually never makes another film. And yet I'm here to tell you that I would be quite happy if he stops. And that is because I love him, and I don't want to see him become that director who stops having anything to say, like so many other directors who just kept making movies after movie, and I'm so fatigued with them that I'm not that interested. They tell me that, for example, the new Roman Polanski film is great, but I have to say that I haven't seen it and I'm not too interested in it. I feel like even the film itself is not one of his most interesting ones. He's not one of the directors whose works I would go see, and because I'm fatigued, really, because I love Polanski's films. Of course, I mentioned the name of a very controversial director, but that's the one that popped in my head. And there are other ones as well. I feel like, this might be controversial to say, but despite the fact that I loved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I feel like Tarantino, if he doesn't stop soon, he's gonna have nothing left to say, and he might become one of those artists who we kind of struggle to celebrate as much as if he had just stopped. I feel like he should stop too, soon anyways. Oh well, first, he shouldn't make Kill Bill Volume 3. I mean, I don't know why people are excited by rumors of making Kill Bill Volume 3. What? So basically, the thing that I've been thinking is that artists struggle to stop, and we could get into a discussion of why they don't stop. I mean, it's hard to quit doing something because it's kind of like admitting that that time of your life is over. I'm not talking about prolonged pauses. You know, prolonged pauses can be beneficial, and we've seen artists come back after ages of not making a movie. Terrence Malick was such a filmmaker, but actually Terrence Malick, I'm tired with him too, you know. When he came back, it was amazing. He came back with The New World, and that was terrific. And then he made The Tree of Life and To the Wonder, which many people don't like, but I love. But the trick really, I know that I've mentioned a lot of filmmakers, but I am mainly talking about Martin Scorsese. The trick is for artists in general, though, to quit before they're ahead. And like I said, we could get into a whole conversation of why they decide to keep going, despite the fact that people are kind of not as eager to experience their stuff. And to many extents, it would be wrong to think that it's important whether we like an artist's work or not. It really should be irrelevant. If an artist wants to keep making films, that's his own business. But really, it would be best for people to kind of for artists to consider what they leave behind for the world and what they put out there in the world and how it's pushed and in what way. I think that should be considered. But also what artists should consider and should not be ashamed of considering is just quit while they're ahead. You might be wondering, well, what would an artist do then? You know, he's been making art all his life. What would an artist do? With whatever is left of their lives. I mean, Martin Scorsese, if he quits now, I'm not sure how old he is actually, but he might have a long life ahead of him. Seriously, let's see how old Martin Scorsese is. Martin Scorsese is 77 years old, so he could have another 20 years left, 20 or 30 years left. What's he going to do with his life? Well, he's kind of already doing something that's amazing, and that is he's very involved in the restoration of films and archives and, just the preservation of movies and film culture. And he's a great representative of the cinematic art in general, not just when he makes film, but also when he talks about films. So he can just do that. And the film world and the art world would be so happy for it. It would be so much better for him to do that than perhaps just start making bad movies like Woody Allen. Hey, that's another controversial director that I'm mentioning, two of them in one video. But listen, I'm a big Woody Allen fan, and I kind of like the stuff that he's come out in the past few years. But, let's face it, they're not like the films that he made, Annie Hall or all of those great, Manhattan, all those great films that he made. He's not making any of those anytime soon. I'm very suspicious of it. But, so, an artist can also become a mentor. Well, whatever happened to just being content with being a mentor for the younger generations? A lot of people give out about the fact that there's nobody to replace musicians or artists of any kind, to replace the great ones of the past. Well, I think a large part of that is because they just don't have the mentors that were there before them to just kind of push them forward and inspire them. I would love for artists to kind of get involved with that more, and fair enough, some of them actually do, but I always feel like they still try to be at the center of attention whenever many of the times when they do that. So Scorsese could get heavy into the film production of filmmakers of the newer generation, and I think he does that. So Scorsese, basically, he's made fantastic films, but if he stops now and he starts focusing on that, I think he can just, be on the line. He could be considered all the more one of the greatest artists of all time. I think he still would be anyways, but I think it would be a great example to set for artists of all kinds to just be encouraged to do that as well. You're a successful artist, you've made it, you've consistently put out great works. Quit while you're ahead. Quit, whenever you get that voice in your head going, this is the last one, maybe you should listen to that voice and consider it. And, if you consider that perhaps that voice in your head is just insecurities and anxieties that we all experience, well, that's different. But if you realize after a while that it's true and that you are running into trouble, then you should quit. And the preservation of art also depends on drastic decisions like those. And that's the end of my video. Guys, thank you for watching this 15-minute video. I hope you were doing other things while you were listening to me blab on about it. Maybe I'll make a video on futurism. I feel quite inspired. Maybe it's pizza. So long. Merry Christmas.